All righty, welcome back for another episode of Two Plane Sports. We're here today. We're recording this on Tuesday the 7th, the day after our recent live stream, our very first one. We had a great time, and if you missed it, we'll be doing one again. I would imagine we'll do another one within the next month or so. We'll be able to ask a bunch of questions, just hang out. We've got a pretty good show today, a little controversial topic to talk about with a little Lincoln Riley. Out west, he was running his mouth on an interview. Jackson Arnold earned his fifth star. Makari Vickers got a crystal ball for Oklahoma. And then a little recap on Reuben Bain and his recent visit to Oklahoma and the implications of his recruitment and if he'll end up being a Sooner ultimately. But before we get into it, I just want to say we appreciate it. Hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, turn the notification bell. If you turn on that notification bell, you'll know when we go live again. Just in case if you forget, typically it'll be between 7 and 8 o'clock Central Time, but we're not sure what date yet. But if you turn on the notification bell, you'll know immediately, and all other future videos as well. Comment on the video. Let us know what you think on this Lincoln Riley deal that we're about to get into and anything else. Find us on social media. Follow us on Twitter. Like us on Facebook. Find us on Instagram. And find us on Apple and Spotify. Follow. Everything's in the description below. So today, I think we'll just start with the hottest topic. I guess I'm gonna before we do that, in our live stream, we were keeping up with the baseball scores. We just have to I have to shout out, OU baseball, making it a supers, playing Virginia Tech coming up on this Friday. I think they play at 2 o'clock Central Time. Be sure to watch that video, and we can kind of talk about that on Friday's video as well. Playing for a national championship in softball against Texas after a little brother decided to choke. So that's always fun. If you guys have anything to say on either one of those topics, pretty exciting stuff.
We're Diamond Sports School now.
Diamond Sports School. Yeah. So, all right. Seems like Lincoln Riley just can't just move on. He decided to take an interview today, or maybe it wasn't today, but the article came out today. Basically talking about his departure from Oklahoma going to USC and various other topics about, LA, West Coast life, all this stuff. I've got a quote for you guys, and I want to hear some reactions and some thoughts on the article as a whole, but I thought this one was a pretty good one. Quote, "I've walked into 4 playoffs, and I've never had better than maybe the third best roster of the 4 teams," Riley said. Every other year, we were a 4 of 4. We had really good rosters, but they weren't the same. I can't imagine that there could be a setting that we could build a better roster than we can here, and here being USC. Okay, so that right there, all right, he's got the thought of, he's going to be able to build the best roster out west. Brandon, I'm not going to give my opinion quite yet. I just want to hear what your opinion is. This should be a good one to listen to.
I think he's the biggest dumb dipshit head in the history of the planet. Like, he's making excuses for losing playoff games because I think he failed as a head coach in these games, and his offense, his pretty little splashy offenses, couldn't play against real defenses. And the fact that he's talking about 4 out of 4 rosters, that 2017 team, as we talked about before we started, was the most talented team in the field, and I don't think it was very close, to be honest with you. You look at that offense alone, we talked about it before we started recording. What was there? There's like 7 or 8 guys who now play in the NFL as starters or key players. You got Joe Mixon, CeeDee Lamb, Marquise Brown, Mark Andrews, Grant Calcaterra was on that team. He just got drafted. Cody Ford, Creed Humphrey, the Heisman-winning quarterback Baker Mayfield. That team was better than anybody. I think anybody in the country on paper. And they started off dominating the game, and then Lincoln Riley choked away in the second half. And now he's sitting here talking like he couldn't build a good roster at Oklahoma, and it's all going to change as soon as because he's at Southern Cal now and they have beaches and stuff. It's a cop-out to me that he couldn't succeed at a big level. And he's going to blame the roster that they put together. Defensively, that 2017 team had Kenneth Murray, who's a first-round pick. Neville Gallimore was a second-round pick. Stephen Parker played a couple years in the league. The talent was there. I don't think by any means it was 4 out of 4, especially in 2017. I think it's a cop-out because he couldn't get it done in the biggest stages. His offenses got shut down by premier defenses. And I truly don't think that story is going to change. I think in a couple of years, because he picked probably the easiest conference in college football, especially if they expand a playoff, he will find his SC Trojans in a playoff game, and the exact same scenario will happen where his teams cannot stop anybody offensively, and his offense will get squashed by premier defenses, especially if they just rush 3 and drop 8.
You want to go, Brum?
Yeah. So I agree with you. I mean, the reason why Oklahoma lost the Rose Bowl against Georgia, and it goes back to that squib kick. I felt like there was a lot of times in his tenure where Oklahoma jumps out to a big lead, and rather than playing to win, they were playing to not lose. And then, he just got all defensive and got way too conservative. I just think that he is still going with this whole story of that he hasn't talked to USC, since before Bedlam or after the Bedlam game, and then all of a sudden decided to hop on the plane and go out there. I think it's pretty pathetic. He's making, like you said, he's making excuses. He had every opportunity to recruit and be at the best he could be at Oklahoma. And at the end of the day, his defensive staff just couldn't recruit at the same level. You started seeing some cracks in the foundation last season. Benny Wiley, with his yoga and everything. I mean, players were upset with him. The writing was kind of coming on the wall when you look back. Hindsight's always 20/20. I just don't think, you're going to be able to go out the West Coast. You're going to be able to be flashy and, sports cars and Lamborghinis and everything else. And then, but when it comes time to win in the trenches, they're not going to be able to. It's the Pac-12, and you're going to be able to fly around. Yeah, you're going to beat California. You're going to beat, Utah, which Utah honestly might give it to them this year. And then you beat Arizona State. There's really not, other than Oregon is really the other premier program, and USC is not even a premier program. They're a has-been. He just thinks that the money and the flashiness of the West Coast is going to be enough, and it might be enough to win the Pac-12. I'm not saying that he won't, because he very well might win it this year with all the roster turnover and everything else. And I know Jose will talk about the roster turnover out there, but when it comes time to win, he's going to have the same mantra that everyone thinks of Oklahoma in the playoffs. And just think about this. In a few years, when Oklahoma's in the SEC, how fun would it be if Brent Venables' SEC defense go against the pretty boy Lincoln Riley's coach, and it's the same thing. I just don't think they're going to be able to be big enough in the trenches. And that's, as we've talked about on the show, you win and lose games in the trenches on the offense and the defensive line. And that's going to be their weakest point. They're going to have great receivers, great running backs. They'll probably even have good defensive backs. They just won't be able to really rush the passer and protect the passer.
So I read the entire article right before we started recording, and I don't know if he's making excuses. What I think is, Lincoln Riley was never a big talker, even at Oklahoma. I think what happened is someone at USC said, hey, look at Brian Kelly. No one's giving him shit about leaving Notre Dame, another premier program, for an SEC program. Just use the same excuse he did to go to LSU, that you just needed a better situation to build a better roster and win championships. Because if you really look at it, Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly did the exact same thing to their previous schools. You're leaving them high and dry, kind of out of nowhere. Notre Dame, you can argue that the situation was maybe slightly different because they still had an opportunity to go to the playoffs, but very similar. Like there's really no reason that where you look at it, there's like, yeah, okay, they need to leave. There's no way they're ever going to make it to the playoffs at these universities, which isn't true. Notre Dame was on the brink of it, and Oklahoma had made it multiple times. He stuck his foot in his mouth. I think that saying that Oklahoma wasn't that USC is a better situation to build a program is, at this point, there's no real evidence of it. and it's really just he needs to look at his recruitment and look at Oklahoma. I mean, 2023, before he left, he had the quarterback that's committed to him for USC as of now. He had, and one of the wide receivers. But then he lost Luke Haas, the tight end. He lost DeAndre Moore, another wide receiver. It looks like he's going to be losing Brandon Ennis to Ohio State. Like, it's not the kids didn't want to go to Oklahoma. It's that he was focused on solely offense. And like one of you guys said, the defensive staff just doesn't do it. And if they continue to do the same thing, they're never going to get to the ultimate goal of national championships. And in the article, they mentioned that Riley and Grinch focus on one key stat that maybe not every, but a lot of the national championship teams have, which is being able to produce, I believe it was 10 plus draft picks in any given year. If you have 10 plus draft picks from your team in 1 year, you are more likely to win a national championship, which, again, that comes down to recruiting. You were on pace to do so at Oklahoma. Literally, there's no difference. If anything, at Oklahoma, as of now, right now, you have a much better chance at recruiting kids that will play for you because there's been success at Oklahoma. For Lincoln Riley, something that was mentioned in the article, I think, he grew up in the area where USC was a premier program. So to him, USC is still a premier program, and he's trying to sell that idea what he saw growing up to these kids. And he's going to get a lot of the California kids, which is great. That's what a lot of USC fans and the Pac-12 commissioner has expressed his displeasure about, is that California kids are leaving. With Lincoln Riley, more of them might stay, and that's great and all, but I mean, then that leaves 49 other states for the rest of the country to recruit from. Leave the California kids in California if you want. Like, you're not going to take every single quarterback to come out of California. They're going to end up leaving. You're not taking every player. Like, you're going to get maybe the players you want, but others will leave to the SEC and go to better programs that will develop the team better. That's been I think the biggest criticism that is completely fair of Lincoln Riley. He needs the talent, but he can't develop it. Or he can get the talent, but he can't develop it, especially with Grinch. And when Grinch was at Oklahoma, and I still think Grinch did bring the defense from being absolutely garbage, terrible defense, probably couldn't even compete at a high school level, to an okay defense where you're thinking, all right, it's just a matter of being consistent, where this team can actually do something at the biggest stage. He couldn't do it. And that, again, Grinch was also mentioned in the article. Grinch mentioned that he just isn't consistent. Being at USC isn't going to make you any more consistent, because at the end of the day, you have players, and if you can't put a program together that's going to develop them and put a game plan together that's going to put them in a position to succeed, you're going to be extremely inconsistent. You're going to have those gaps in your defense. I mean, look at the defensive line last year. You had Nick Bonito, Perrion Winfrey, Isaiah Thomas, Jalen Redmond, and yes, he was hurt the early part of the season, but then you had Isaiah Coe as well. And then his defensive backs, they were younger, but they were still talented. Like, he's supposed to be the safeties coach, and I think the safety position was very iffy throughout the year, and then he didn't really coach up the defensive line like he should have. Like, it's got to be on him at some point and stop. And like, both of these guys just need to just look back and say, we had our faults in this. At this point, I don't give a shit that they left. We just say we had our faults and move on. Like, they just weren't the guys to compete at Oklahoma and make a national championship. And maybe they'll learn from it, but it doesn't seem like they will.
I have a couple things. I think whenever you said that Lincoln Riley can recruit talent, not develop it, that is a nail on the head. That's perfect. So I have a couple things to say about. I don't know if you said it, if you're quoting the article, kind of, but the idea, the philosophy of you can build a better program in Southern California than Oklahoma. To me, I genuinely, not just as a homer, that's bullshit. Genuine question, boys. When was the last time that Southern California had a better roster than Oklahoma in football? 2003? 2004, maybe?
I mean,
Not this decade, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So that the whole that it's better to build out there. I think it's stupid just because they have beaches and cars and fun stuff, whatever. And then you mentioned the article saying the thing about if you get 10 draft picks, whatever, that is like a good stat, or whatever, to win national titles. And that might be true. I'm not obviously if you have draftable players, you've got a good team. That's a good thing. But it goes back to Lincoln Riley. He's chasing these 5 stars. That's all he cares about is stars. And stars don't. I'm not saying stars don't matter. They do. But to only chase these stars and just rely on their talent alone is not going to win you the big games in college football. I would argue if you find a guy that you actually like for your team, think that you're going to fit on your roster perfectly, and you develop them and you mold them, whatever star they are. Granted, you want to be 5 stars, but if it's a 3-star, 4-star, and you build these guys to what you want and you develop them and you coach them correctly, they will end up being a draft pick. So instead of looking for draft picks before they get here because they're 5 stars and they're going to be really talented, why don't you make them a draft pick and you can win that way too? I just think I can't stand the dude.
Yeah. I guess one final thought is, you know why they probably think they can build a better roster out in California is because the deficiency on the defensive side, they can sell. It's to come to Norman, Oklahoma. Don't get me wrong. We're all from Oklahoma. Brandon and I live in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's not a destination as far as for going on vacation or anything like that. If you come play football at Oklahoma, you're coming because of the football program. And Grinch was having to sell his abilities as a coach, which he's good, but he's not great. I mean, he improved. Now he can be out in the West Coast and say, look, I'm a good defensive coach, not great, but you can come live out in California and you can stay home. It's that extra selling point because they can't recruit the way that Venables can recruit and his staff can recruit just purely off football. But I don't know.
One thing that Brandon said, which I kind of disagree with, I think it is going to be easier to recruit in Los Angeles. I think that's simple and objective. Like we talk about it all the time on this show, and we talked about it when we were in school before this podcast. Like, why, as a student, right, as a 17, 18-year-old kid, why wouldn't you want to go to a place like USC or Miami or Arizona State? They're big cities where there's parties all the time. Now with NIL, probably going to get you paid a lot of money, and you can do a lot of dumb shit, which is completely fair. But if you want to play football and make football your sole focus and your mission to be in the NFL, Lincoln Riley is good for a quarterback. For everyone else, meh. Like you'll be an okay receiver, but I can't. I mean, outside of that, really.
The only thing that the beaches, the big lights, the dumb shit that is fun for college students, yeah, absolutely. But that's been there forever, and they have not fielded a better roster than Oklahoma in almost 2 decades.
But they've
and
had
that dumb
good
shit's
players.
always been there. The dumb shit's always been there.
That's fine, but they've had good players. Like they
then
just had Drake London get drafted. They've had a bad overall team and probably terrible coaching with Clay Helton. But they have been able to recruit decent.
Yeah, but Clay Helton wasn't there for 2 decades.
But they had right. I'm not saying that, but they've always produced draft picks. That's just a matter of fact. They had Juju Smith-Schuster. They had Sam Darnold, who might be hot garbage, but he was the number 3 overall draft pick. In this last draft, they had Drake London. They've had talent come out of there. They've just never been able to put it together. So I do think it's easier to recruit to LA. I don't think that's going to make his job any easier, though, because look at his tenure at Oklahoma. There were so many kids that were getting in legal issues for whatever dumb shit. And like Brum said, Norman is not a destination. There's very minimal dumb shit to do in Oklahoma other than drinking, parties, and having fun with your friends. In LA, you got so many more potential risks. And if Lincoln Riley doesn't learn from the bad stuff that he did at Oklahoma, he's not going to be any better. And I think that's the problem. He's just pointing backwards and saying it was more so the issue of the university I was in rather than it was my fault. And I can't, like, he can't recognize that he was at fault for not being able to produce a national championship at Oklahoma.
Yeah. And I would argue also that, I mean, Pete Carroll had some great rosters over his run. I mean, he was there from like
Yes.
01 to 09. And after Pete Carroll, you look at their coaches, what is it? It's like Lane Kiffin, Ed
Sark.
Orgeron, and
Everybody in college football loves Lane Kiffin. Kids want to play for Lane Kiffin. You had Lane Kiffin and you had the dumb shit, and they still.
Here's the deal: as much as you don't like Lincoln Riley, this is the best coach that they've had since Pete Carroll, but far and away.
At least a proven head coach. I think that's the biggest difference, and that's something that was pointed out in the article. He's the best head coach they've had, which is undoubtable. But the problem is going to be, can he develop and can he keep the kids focused on the field and not distracted? Because there's significantly more distractions off field with parties and now with money. Like, they're going to be in positions like, I mean, look, they got Brew McCoy. What was it, 3 years ago under Clay Helton? He was a 5-star wide receiver, I believe. He might have been the number 1 receiver in his class.
After he had transfer from Texas.
Yeah, so he got so many legal troubles in LA. He never really got to play. And where is he going now? I know he transferred out. I'm not sure where he's now, but like the issue isn't Oklahoma and it might be easier to recruit at USC. The issue is Lincoln Riley. It really is. Like, he might be people, and we were saying it before, he is possibly the best offensive mind in college football. But he can't put that shit together as a whole team, as a whole unit to win a national championship. At least he hasn't proven it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I know some people are probably watching this and like, gosh, why are they talking about Lincoln Riley? But, when he says things like this, it's just something we have to talk about on here. So we talked about it at length for quite a while. So we'll move on to some Oklahoma football recruiting and some news. We'll talk about that now for the rest of the episode. Let us know what you think about what Lincoln Riley said. And this is kind of like a mid-video challenge. Let us know what your opinion is on it. Should we just shut up and not talk about him? Do you think he's right? I would assume not. Or tell us why he's wrong. I mean, he is wrong, but, it doesn't matter. So we'll move on. Kind of funny. We were talking last night on the live stream. Someone, I don't know who, asked, how do we think we'll have one or more 5-stars on this roster or for this recruiting class in the 2022 class or 23 class? Sorry. And I picked the over. Brandon, I think you picked the over, and I think Jose, you picked the over. And we all said, well, we think we already have one because Jackson Arnold's going to get that 5th star. That's just luck. I'm not going to sit here and act like we knew that the 5th star was going to be updated today, but Jackson Arnold picked up his 5th star on 247. He's the Sooners quarterback in the 23 class. Picked up his 5th star. I think that's huge. Not that it really changes a whole lot, but he deserved to be a 5-star. Maybe his name when he's recruiting his future teammates carry a little more weight now that he's got his 5th star. I don't know. Jose, do you have any thoughts on Arnold picking up his 5th star? I still stand by OU's going to have more than one 5-star on this recruiting class because they already have one now.
I think it's big time, right? That means he proved to the scouts that go out there for these platforms during the spring and this early part of summer during whatever camps he's been attending that he belongs in that upper echelon of his class, the 5-star kids in the 2023 class. So, and it shows that Lubby and Venables got it right. That's something that, I mean, at the time he was just the first quarterback to visit and was able to commit. As I've said multiple times, Jane Rashada has expressed, I think like a month after Jackson Arnold committed, that he was going to visit the next week and he had full intentions to commit. Jaden Rashada also seems to be on track to be a 5-star if he's not already. So they were looking at the right guys, and I'm glad we got the guy that we did. Hopefully now that he does have his 5-star, has some sort of influence with these offensive talents, and it looks like it may have with a couple offensive linemen if we use Twitter as any indication, with Peyton Kirkland and Caden Green posting a picture. And Richard Young commented back on it. I think Richard Young's a long shot, but it's always possible.
I think Jackson Arnold, simply put, is going to be that guy. And this is just the hatred I have for Lincoln Riley spewing again, whatever. But I'm going to, for the rest of their college careers, compare him to Malachi Nelson and just hope he blows Malachi Nelson's statistics and ability out of the water. And I think he has that capability to do that. Jackson Arnold has all the tools you want. The dude threw 445 passes last year. Only 5 of them were intercepted. He had about 4,000 yards passing, 35 touchdown passes. He also rushed for 700 yards and 12 touchdowns. There's nothing really that Jackson Arnold can't do on the field. I think he, as we've talked about multiple times, it's well deserved. I think he's going to be very, very good for Oklahoma. Hopefully, in that Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray type category range for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we expected, and like you said, that just means he produced and he showed out at some camps, and scouts agree. Tons of talent with Jackson Arnold. Glad he picked up his 5th star, and congratulations to him. Now let's just land some recruits to come with you. We did talk a little bit on the live stream about OU landing 2023 4-star wide receiver Keon Brown. So for anyone that didn't check out the live stream, you might want to go check that out now. It's towards the beginning of the video. We talked about Keon Brown's commitment after we talked about the greatest Sooner, potentially in Jocelyn Allo. But someone that is his really good friend, Keon Brown's good friend, is Makari Vickers. We actually talked a little bit on Vickers during the live stream, but Makari picked up a crystal ball from Parker Thune literally within the hour of us recording this podcast, and I just saw it pop up. He came for an official visit this past weekend. He's got Michigan on the 10th. Alabama on the 16th, and Texas on the 24th. Makari and Keon are pretty good friends. Keon stated that he's going to recruit Makari, and crystal ball to Oklahoma for Makari. And I think Makari is the number one safety target that OU's got on their radar that is realistic to land. He's 2023 4-star. He's a number 5 safety in the class, number 84 overall, 6'1", 180 pounds, out of Tallahassee, Florida. So SEC country. OU's trending in the right way. Seemed like the visit went really well. I think OU's going to be really hard to beat, with, especially with Keon Brown recruiting him now, and they can kind of go together. He would be a huge get. I was really pessimistic with his recruitment towards the beginning, like in March. He came on, I think his first visit was in March unofficially. And before that visit, I wasn't really too confident. But after the couple visits, now as friends committed to the Sooners, I feel really good about Makari. Brandon, what do you think?
Definitely. I mean, he's one of the 6 or 7 guys that were on campus or visiting that we talked about with Oklahoma. We felt was in a firm lead for. And it's good to see a crystal ball come in the next day. He's another kid who fits the mold of what we're doing. He's big, he's fast, he's a 2-sport athlete, he runs track as well. I think he'll fit really well in that Sooner offense. And I agree, he's probably the top safety target. It'd be nice to land him, and hopefully pair him with that the whole defensive back room can just be so fun. I'm so excited for it. Makari Vickers. Let's hope we're right, and let's hope that lead stays and he eventually does commit.
It's never a bad thing to have a DB whose nickname is Seatbelt. So I'm pretty happy that he's in. I guess Oklahoma's in contention to get him, and like serious contention, not just randomly put on a top 8 list because he talked to Coach Valai 1 or 2 times. This is good. The defense is getting better. I think Coach Valai is doing an amazing job at recruiting these guys. It seems like he's got his hand in almost every single kid's recruitment. And I mentioned it yesterday during our live stream. It seems like he's starting to take more of a lead recruiter role. Him and Kale seem to be like the head recruiters of this staff. So whatever is happening, whatever title he needs to get to make sure that he doesn't leave in the next year, then let's make sure he gets it, because he's going to be key to recruiting these defensive backs and making this defense SEC ready.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Makari's OU's in a great spot for Makari. I think it's going to end really well for OU. And this has been kind of a reoccurring topic after this Champion Barbecue. I oddly feel confident about like 7 to 10 4-star, 5-star kids, maybe a couple 3-stars. I feel really confident on a lot of guys, and I feel like this next month or two is going to be really good for Oklahoma. And I think Makari could be one of those 10 or so over the next few months. We'll move on to the next guy. I don't have quite as high hopes for this last guy we're going to be talking about. We've talked about him before, but Reuben Bain, he's from Miami. He's a 2023 4-star, number 191 overall, number 28 defensive lineman in the class, 6'2", 250 pounds from Miami, Florida, as I said. Last year, just for reference of how good of a year he had 29 and a half sacks in high school, which how that's even possible, I really don't know. But he put up 29 and a half sacks last year, which is insane. He came out for an official visit to Oklahoma, and from my understanding, this was his only visit to Oklahoma. It's a far trip from OU, or from Miami to Norman, and while I think OU has pushed him, made some good progress in this recruitment. I mean, it had to have been good enough to be able to get him on an official, to use one of his officials. I just don't think it's enough. I believe it's his brother, Reginald Bain, is a grad assistant at the University of Miami. A crystal ball to Miami came out after the visit from Steve Wiltfong at 247. Typically, Steve Wiltfong knows what he's talking about. And, I just, while I'd love to have Reuben Bain, I think OU has a lot of great defensive line and edge players that they're in a really good spot for in the 23 class and the 24 class. This isn't a huge loss. I was really hopeful for him. Now, not that it's totally over. You always want someone that's had nearly 30 sacks in a season. I just don't feel great about Bain, so I would not get my hopes up if I were me. Jose, what do you think?
Bain is going to be a really good defensive lineman wherever he goes, and it sounds like it's going to be to Mario Cristobal in Miami, which, just real quick to go back to our first point, I don't understand why people aren't hyping up Miami like they are USC, but I guess that's a different topic. Bain is just really good. Like, you just threw out his stats, and that's as a junior. For all we know, if he wants to legitimately play his full senior season, he could rack up 30 plus sacks and just beat his record from last year. Like, this kid is very talented, and it's unfortunate that it seems like Oklahoma is not in the position to fully secure his commitment, but it's something that we mentioned the last time we talked about him, just how far that trip is to get him to Oklahoma. And that's why we're so excited about potentially getting Derek LeBlanc, because he has made it to Oklahoma so many times unofficially, where he still has his official visit that he can use in the fall during a football game. And that just kind of that's the one gap that we need to somehow, that the staff needs to somehow find a way to bridge, because going into the SEC, it seems like this staff is really focusing on recruiting in Florida. And Brum and I talked about it a while ago. I don't know if it was on the video, but between most of Florida and getting to Oklahoma, you're passing the entire SEC country. Like, there's so many obstacles that Oklahoma has to try to battle to get these Florida kids to come to Oklahoma. And I'm not saying it's impossible. I think it's actually going to become more likely as time goes on because of this staff. But as of right now, it's going to be tough to get these guys to make that leap and commit to Oklahoma on just one visit.
Yeah, I mean, tough spot. I don't like the odds either. I'm with you guys on that. It's probably the Todd Bates Venables effect that even got a visit, which we've talked about a lot. It's still good. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not over as much as we're talking like it is. I mean, there's always a chance. You never know what these kids are going to decide at some point in this recruitment process or whatever, but it's going to be tough to get him to leave the state of Florida, especially as you mentioned, Brum, with his brother being on staff at Miami. Who wouldn't want to go play with their brother as potentially one of their coaches? Really, really talented kid. We're not, as you guys said too, I'm not going to sit here and act like he's not, just because I don't like where Oklahoma sits with him. Hopefully we can switch it in somewhere in this long recruiting process. Get him on campus a couple more times. But yeah, it's an uphill battle.
Maybe this is one of the few. Maybe this is one of the few Fong gets wrong. That's the one we got to hope for. I think this kid he's got to be, if we can somehow find a way to land him, I think that'd be big time.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, early national signing day is still a little over 6 months away from right now. Not OU, but Miami has a terrible year, even with crystal ball, lays an egg. OU tears it up. That could be enough to sway his recruitment coming into October, November. If Miami drops 3 or 4 games by mid-November, he might start thinking like, oh man, they might finish 7-5 or 7-5 or something. I don't know about that. And OU sitting in there at 10-0, 10-1, or what 11-0. He might be thinking twice on that. So that could be a possibility. Just hopefully they keep recruiting him, which I'm sure they will. I just would not get my hopes up too high. And honestly, by that point, the defensive line spots might be full at Oklahoma. That might be a weird concept that none of us really are used to. At defensive line, the scholarships might be full by then. Not saying that they would be, but with how good they sit with a lot of other kids in the 23 class, there's only going to be so many spots to go around. So a little bit of a longer show today, but do you guys have any final thoughts? If not, Brandon, do you want to roll into your end-of-video challenge?
We'll just stick with your mid-video challenge, and I'm curious to see everybody's thoughts on the whole Lincoln Riley take today. What do you guys think of our takes on what he said, or what the interview, the process that he's talking about? Just your Lincoln Riley thoughts.
This should be interesting to read the comment section, but for sure, let us know what you think. I'm sure we're going to have a few USC trolls in here as well, but bring it on. It's all good.
Shout out Jeff.
Shout out Jeff. So, and then what was it? Daniel also. There's a couple other ones that would come by. So if you made it this far, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton. Turn on the notification bell. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Apple, and Spotify. Everything's linked in the description below. We will catch you guys Friday. See you guys.